meeting to order then. Debbie, if I could get a roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Young.
Here.
Councilwoman Long. Here. Councilwoman O'Neill. Here. Councilman Schoner.
Here.
Mayor Hoff.
Here.
Mr. Simpson.
Here.
Mr. Yarborough.
We will stand for the pledge and Mr. Alderman do the invocation.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we ask that you be with us this evening. We ask that you help these elected officials deliberate and make the best decision for your kingdom here on earth. In your name we pray. Amen.
I need a motion to approve the minutes of May the 9th and the special call meeting on May the 16th.
Move to approve.
Second. Have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Citizens to be heard. If anybody in the audience would like to speak on anything on the agenda, not on the agenda, please feel free to come up and share the microphone with us. If you would, sir, please state your name and address for us.
William Wise, 2163 Robin Hood Trail, South Daytona, obviously. I saw something in the minutes about trying to start issuing citations for parking, and I was a little confused upon what you're actually trying to attempt with that. If you're actually trying to attempt to have code enforcement specialists write parking tickets on, that is not going to be allowed under the statute you're trying to do it. I do have a state of Florida Attorney General opinion, so I don't know if that's what you're trying to achieve with that or not.
Well, it's an item that we discussed on the agenda. We appreciate your comments.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else? We'll bring it back to the agenda. Anything for the attorney's report?
Sure, there's a couple things. One, I want to update you on the status of the transfer of the tower. We have retained an attorney that specializes in telecommunication laws and represents cities with towers, as you know. He's been in communication with Crown, or Castle Crown, and not having much luck reaching an extension agreement. So what we've decided is we will just let the lease expire, and then the lease is actually with AT&T, or Bell South, and AT&T took it over. And we're going to be on a month-to-month basis with AT&T, subject to the same terms and conditions, in essence like a holdover tenant. The attorney's already reached out to both Bell South and is it T-Mobile, Joe, the other one?
Yes.
T-Mobile, to start discussions with them. And according to him, Crown Castle acknowledges as of June 21st that they will no longer be in the picture on the issue. So that's kind of where that sits. The other issue, as you probably heard, the legislature adopted a medical marijuana law. I've reviewed that this weekend, kind of see how that impacts what we can and can't do as a local government. As you know, we have a moratorium, and it does have quite an impact. We have a couple choices. One option, surprisingly, is we have the ability to ban medical marijuana dispensaries in our community. Option two is the state provides that medical marijuana dispensaries have to be 500 feet away from any school, public or private. We do have the right to increase that 500-foot distance restriction. Just to refresh your memory, 500 feet is our alcohol distance restriction, but we also go to churches, not just schools. If we want to do any other type of regulation under state law, we have to apply that regulation also to any pharmacy that comes into the city. So if we were going, now the increasing the distance we can do, but if we want to say you got to be 500 feet, not from just schools, you got to be from churches, now pharmacies have to be 500 feet from churches. In discussions with John and Joe, if we do nothing in essence, medical marijuana dispensaries are going to be allowed 500 feet from any school, and they would basically, because of the way the state law is written, I think, be viewed under our code as a pharmacy. And so wherever a pharmacy is allowed, a medical marijuana dispensary would be allowed, subject to that 500-foot restrictions, which pharmacies are not subject to. So I would say it's our recommendation that we bring back to you, depending, I don't know what the time frame is, and it would take us, I think, probably 2 meetings to repeal the moratorium, so I don't know if it's worth it. But probably the only thing that we really need to do is nothing, unless we want to repeal the moratorium and get that over with sooner. Because unless you want to ban it, and in discussions with the city manager, I know he was not recommending that to me, or you want to increase the distance on the 500 foot. I don't think we want to adopt any further regulations, because that will then also apply to pharmacies, all types of pharmacies. So,
Scott, what about pre-existing locations of pharmacies? So let's say we go to 1,000 feet. Any pharmacies that are currently within?
1,000 feet's okay. We can increase the distance from a school, and the law allows us to do that.
I hear you. So let's make it 1,000 feet from a school and a church.
And church, right.
But what
Liquor's
about
500 feet.
Huh?
Our liquor ordinance is 500 feet.
For,
So what you're saying with that is that liquor's okay within 500 feet, but marijuana, medical marijuana dispensaries are not. I think what I would recommend you all consider doing, and remembering that, of course, 72% of the folks in South Daytona voted for medical marijuana, I would repeal your ordinance. The only question I'd have is, do you want to regulate hours? And I don't know if we can do that without regulating.
You're going to regulate pharmacy hours?
So not being able to do that, the state statute's doing a pretty good job on it. You're treating it like a pharmacy. You can't put it in an industrial zone. We can't prohibit them from the redevelopment area because pharmacies are permitted there. You'd work off the statute. I will tell you that we've had a couple of distributors that have made inquiries about the status of our moratorium. What I was going to do is bring to you first reading on the ordinance that would revoke the moratorium on your July agenda. If you got any thoughts, let me know, but I don't see any reason to bring you a new law regulating it. It looks like they've pretty much preempted us on where they can go.
When does the moratorium expire?
December?
12 months, if I'm not.
It's 12 months from when we adopted it. I just can't remember when we adopted it.
Do you know what our neighboring cities are doing?
Well, the ones who adopted regulations are probably revamping them, because you cannot adopt a regulation that, I can actually find that wording for you. You can't adopt a regulation that limits the number that can be in a city, like the allocation of them. That's done by the state. So these jurisdictions that say, well, we don't want any more than, they have to be at least 1,000 foot apart. I don't think you can do that. One, you're going to say pharmacies have to be 1,000 feet apart. And then two, there's this provision in the law that says you cannot adjust the allocation. I think that's the right word. I'll pull up the statute right now.
While you're looking at what I hear you saying is if we want to make it so that it restricts other churches, parks, other things, then we're also putting pharmacies in the same group.
Correct.
Corners aren't big enough for CVS's and Walgreens to be 1,000 foot apart.
That's a good point.
Well, I'm thinking the strip center right there at Reconnect.
I think we might be worried about a concentration that won't happen.
Well, that would be the next question. What is the allocation based on?
I'll just read you the statute. It says, a county or municipality that does not ban dispensing facilities under this subparagraph, which says you can if you want to ban them, may not place specific limits by ordinance on the number of dispensing facilities that may locate within that county or municipality. So, unlimited. We can't regulate it. You can ban them, but either,
You could regulate pharmacies maybe, but you couldn't regulate dispensaries. Is that what you're saying?
no, I'm just saying you can't regulate the number of, if you decide not to ban them, you cannot regulate how many medical marijuana dispensaries there are in your community. You can ban them, prevent them altogether, but once you allow them, you can't say, I'm going to allow them, but they have to be 1,000 feet apart. Or we're only going to allow 4.
Yeah,
Can't do that.
but you just...
It has nothing to do with pharmacies.
That's my point.
And it takes effect July 1st?
Why would we be in a hurry to remove the moratorium?
It's up to you all. It's just that
I think so.
my understanding was that we put the moratorium in effect till we saw what we could and couldn't do based upon enabling legislation from the legislature or the regulations legislature. Now that we know those, and the governor's committed to approving them, and 72% of the public voted for it, I kind of thought, I might want to revoke the
I just don't,
moratorium.
I don't need to be the point of the spear on this one.
I understand that.
I agree.
I am bringing to you all an ordinance revoking the moratorium. You got 2 readings, plenty of time for us to decide whether or not there's some sort of regulation we need. Just because I think that whether we like it or not, it's kind of like an electrical system where you voted for it or not, it's already a done deal. The public said no. And I'm waiting on you. I can settle it, so y'all don't have to prove it.
Seems like state law would trump the moratorium.
The moratorium may be able to stay in effect, but the reality is, there's not a whole lot we
You
can
got to do
do.
one or the other.
I mean, I guess we can always tell people we're considering banning you from the city. So don't ask until our moratorium is up. So, and I actually think it's going to be challenged. I know John Morgan has talked about challenging it, but, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me that the Constitution was amended, in essence allowing it. But we have the ability, each jurisdiction can ban the facility. So if all the counties and cities say we're banning it, well, that just seems to go contrary to what the Constitution said.
Yeah.
But so you can ban it, but if you don't ban it, well, then you can't regulate it at all. That's kind of a, and this is an 89-page statute. And there's like 2.5 pages dealing with what local governments can do. The state regulation on this is incredible. I mean, it's very, very detailed. So,
We've had, 2 inquiries, Jeff?
I'm sorry.
We've had 2 inquiries?
Yes.
at least.
I just think that maybe we're missing the point. We're talking medical marijuana. And it's not like we're going to have all our teenagers out there on the corners smoking pot. And
Ain't
they...
gonna be smoking medical marijuana either.
No, well,
That's right.
it's in 72%, like Joe said, 72% of the population did vote for this. And if it's highly regulated, and I just think that also, let's face it, our city, whether it's pharmacies or any kind of business that we could bring in would be good. And other cities are already bringing in, these are stores that are legal stores that are, I guess, like pharmacies, but yeah, legal. And I just think that we should, as you say, maybe consider ending the moratorium and go ahead and plan where we want them to be, and we can regulate it.
No, we don't. There's no planning where they go.
Well, I realize that. I'm just saying that we can,
They go where pharmacies go.
all right, where the pharmacies go,
Y'all got
yeah.
2 choices. Let it expire, or go ahead and revoke it.
I'm for revoking.
I think it's going to be a losing battle if we don't.
I guess the only thing that I would throw out there is, this is, and it's pretty straightforward, so I don't know how anybody can have any other interpretation, but it's a long, big statute. I haven't heard anything from it what the other cities are doing. Now, you don't really, it's pretty plain what you can do. the only kind of question I have is, and I think the intent of this was that, you know, they had this Charlotte's Web and some low THC marijuana that was approved legislatively. I think this wasn't to incorporate all this into it. But it may be that the medical marijuana statute that I've read applies to a certain type, and there's other types that are out there that are unregulated by the state. I doubt that, but, I mean, it's pretty clear to me. I guess what I'm saying is I haven't heard any other cities' comments about what they're going to do. So, I mean, this just came out Friday.
And it takes effect July 1, right?
I think it takes effect July 1.
And our meeting is in July.
We have a meeting in
First
July.
meeting's July 11th.
So we will, hopefully by then, we will all have more information. I'd be in favor of ending the moratorium, but
Let's do this. Let me put it on the agenda. It doesn't mean you have to take action.
You could take
There might be something else come up. I think what I'm worried about is the appearance that you're not being responsive to what the electorate asks you to do.
anything else, Scott?
No, that's it.
City managers report?
July 11th, so next council.
Okay. Is that all you have?
Yes, sir.
Old business, ordinance 1703. Scott, if you would read by title only.
Ordinance number 17-03 by title only for second and final reading. An ordinance of the City of South Daytona, Florida, amending the city's land development regulation code by creating section 5.7C20 to allow sign manufacturing as a special exception use in business general commercial zoning districts, establishing rules and conditions for sign manufacturing as a special exception, providing for severability, providing for conflicting ordinances, and providing an effective date.
I need a motion.
Move to approve. Second.
I have a motion and a second. This is a second reading, so public hearing is allowed. Anybody from the public would like to speak for or against ordinance 1703? Seeing none, bring it back to council.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Scott, ordinance 1705, please.
Ordinance number 17-05 by title only, second and final reading. An ordinance of the City Council, City of South Daytona, Florida, amending section 2-304A, notices to provide for code enforcement notice consistent with state law, amending section 10-1.2B, city citation to authorize code enforcement officers to issue citations for certain code violations, amending section 2-297, definitions to amend the definition of code enforcement officer to include parking enforcement specialists, providing for severability, providing for conflicting ordinances, and providing an effective date.
Need a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Again, this is second reading. This is a public hearing. Anybody that would like to speak for or against 1705? Seeing none, bring it back to council. Any discussion?
If you would like for me to respond to the one public comment, that was provided to me by the city manager. I read the Attorney General opinion, presumably what he was holding up. We are not enforcing the state traffic code law, traffic enforcement law, on private property. What we are enforcing is city code parking regulations on private property. So that ordinance really, that Attorney General's opinion doesn't apply. We're not enforcing the traffic citation laws. So they will not be issuing traffic citations under a state traffic citation. They'll be issuing a city code citation. They already do that now. What the ordinance is really doing is allowing our code enforcement officers to issue citations for code violations. And we have a resolution coming up that will set that citation amount, the fine amount. But our police officers have been issued code citations for certain code violations that we designate for quite a long period of time. And the reason we've added parking enforcement specialist to the definition of a code enforcement officer is just to make sure when you read the state law, it talks about parking enforcement specialists having the authority to enforce state and local parking laws throughout the municipality. And as an abundance of caution, I think we're going to have some of our code enforcement be trained as parking enforcement specialists so that they will then be the ones that issue the parking violation, city code parking violations, just so no one could say the state law requires only a parking enforcement specialist issue a parking citation, even though it's not a state parking citation, it's a city parking citation. So it's two different laws altogether. What's in there?
Any other staff?
I think he summarized it very nicely.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Scott, if you would, 1706, please.
Ordinance number 17-06 by title only for a second and final reading. An ordinance of the City Council, City of South Daytona, Florida, repealing Section 2-150, additional regulations and procedures of the Code of Ordinances, and adopting a new Section 2-150, acquisition, sale, and lease of real property, adopting procedures for the acquisition of real property and the sale and lease of city property, providing for severability, providing for conflicting ordinances, and providing an effective date.
I need a motion.
Move to approve?
Second.
Any staff on this one?
Not really. It's the same thing that we went through before regarding what brought this about was the attorney that we retained to assist us in severing our relationship with Crown Tower over the cell tower, for us to then take over the ownership and look at maybe contracting out another company to maintain the tower for us, and therefore getting the revenue directly from the two tenants, AT&T and T-Mobile. He said you needed probably to put an ordinance in effect that would make sure that whoever the tenants are on the tower bore the cost of negotiating the lease and any cost associated with it. Thus, this ordinance came about. Okay?
Okay. This is second reading, public hearing. Anybody in the audience that would like to speak for or against ordinance number 1706? Seeing none, I bring it back to council. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. New business, consideration of awarding a contract to the apparent low bidder, RJ Landscape Contractors, Inc., for the amount not to exceed $393,800 for the US 1 landscape improvement and $34,630 for CEI. Mr. Yarborough?
Yes. If you recall, 2 years ago, we started putting some money back for this project. It first came about with 100% grant for the landscaping, but we had some additions like lighting and some other things that were not covered within the scope of the grant. As we discussed at the last mid-year budget amendment meeting, we talked about carving some of that money that we had set aside for the project out in order to put it toward reserve that got somewhat diminished last year, or this year we're in. When we bid the project, we were glad to see that it came within the budgeted amount minus about $70,000. Is that right, Kevin? Do you remember how much we carved out of it? Greg?
Yes, we took out 100, yes.
About 100?
100.
About 100 out of what we had appropriated. Now, what that means is that the lighting that was not covered under the scope of the grant will not be put in the median at this time. And this is an example. The conduit will be, though. And I'm sure they're going to tear up the irrigation and they're going to have to replace it, which would be part of the scope of work under the contract, grant contract. You are still going to have $70,000 of redevelopment funds, local funds earmarked on the project, and a substantial amount of that is for the inspection cost that's associated with, who was the engineer on the project? Quentin Hampton. Thank you. It wasn't mentioned in the memo. So you're saving money, you're getting the project done. It's going to be a lot better than what we got down there now. The lighting will be budgeted, not next year, the next year, to bring it up to scope. And once all that's done, we're going back in there with the entrance sign that got destroyed for the south end of the city. I'm sure that there's plenty of folks here that can try to address any questions you have, Mr. Mayor, members of council.
I need a motion. Move for approval.
Second.
Any other discussion?
It's nice to see numbers come in below what we thought they would be.
Barely.
For a change, right?
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Consideration of approving the Audit Review Selection Committee's recommendation to award the contract to Moats and Associates. Mr. Yarborough?
All right, back the end of last year, a committee was appointed to review in the RSP for audit in the city. It was a multi-year contract. It was going to be 3 years with 2 one-year renewals. You had 3 bids. You have those bids in your tab. The committee, as I understand it, met twice. They opened the bids, they reviewed the bids. Well, they met 3 times. They met to put the RFP together. They met at bid opening and went over the bids, and they met a 3rd time. And the recommendation was to go with the low bid, Moats and Associates, for a number of different reasons, as I understand it. I did not attend those meetings. The committee was made up of the city attorney, who is a CPA, or has a CPA, the finance director, and Councilwoman O'Neill, who would be much better able to answer any specific questions you have. I do know that there were 2 changes that came from the bid specs or the RFP that were negotiated with Moats and Associates. One, at no cost, they will meet individually with each council member. And this is something that customarily has never occurred at your request to go over the audit before it's made in a presentation before the full council. So any specific questions you all may have, you can air them out then, individually. Number 2, it was changed from a 3-year and 2 one-year renewals to a 2-year and 1-year renewals at the option of the council.
3 one-year renewals.
3 one-year renewals. So, as I understand it, the concerns were twofold. One, with the new finance director, we definitely needed to try to keep some continuity, they felt. Secondly, with the manager that's on the, that's looking at probably retirement within 2 years, they wanted some more continuity within the organization. So they said, look, let's go with 2 years. The council wants to renew them. They got 3 one-year options. And any other questions, I think, need to be directed to the committee members because I wasn't there. Okay?
I'll start. Thank you to Lisa for serving on that. I did that a few years ago. I know the process. I like the bids. I like the fact that when you do an RFP, you get some qualified service providers, in this case, especially James Moore, and their reputation. But again, Moats being local, the contingents or the low bid price, I like that. I also appreciate the changes that you made there. I think the 2 and then the 3 ones is the better, and the audit, the one-on-one meetings probably is something that we should have done a long time ago. So.
Well, we're trying for a year, but we're already halfway into the fiscal year, so.
Rob?
I like the one-on-one. That's a good idea.
Thank you. I thought that was important.
And I think, like we know, Moats and Moore, they're both excellent companies, but when it really comes down to the dollar, $27,000 is the difference between them. That's a big difference. And I think, as Joe says, they have, I guess you would say, the history with the new finance director and potential retirements of some people ahead of time, in the future. It is good to have somebody that has our, I guess, our history, too. So, and I guess that's probably one reason why they're able to be the cheapest bid. So, anyway. So I think he's done a good job for these past years.
I don't disagree with anything being said. I was just really hoping for a new set of fresh eyes to look at it. But I need a motion.
If the money was closer, Bill, we would have been.
I'm agreeing. I need a motion for approval.
Move for approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Scott, by title only, Resolution 1705.
Resolution number 17-05 by title only for first and only reading. A resolution of the City of South Daytona, Florida for vehicle parking violations to modify the list of code violations that may be enforced by the issuance of a city citation and establish a fine amount, providing for severability, providing for conflicting resolutions, and providing for an effective date.
I need a motion.
Move to approve.
Second. Any staff, Mr. Yarborough?
I can help you with it. Some years back, we put a lot of items, local fines, into the magistrate's venue. We thought we had reviewed them at the time to see if the fines were current. They might have been then, but $15 turned out to be way too low, we found, in comparing to what other cities had adopted. As a matter of fact, $15 is our existing fine for illegal parking, and it had been in effect since 1985. Staff put together a list of what other cities in the area are charging, and Edgewater's at $77, Daytona Beach is at $35, Port Orange is at $30. They have a number of them at $25, like Holly Hill, Orange City, and New Smyrna, and you got one at $18 in DeLand. I hadn't figured that out. Ponce Inlet's got $15. It was a recommendation that we go to a $25 across the board, and that's what you're establishing, that the magistrate can charge. What about Ms. Scott?
Well, the other purpose of this resolution is, kind of goes with that ordinance where we are dealing with parking violations, is we, by our code, by resolution, we designate those city code violations that can be enforced through a citation system, as opposed to our other code enforcement process, and it sets the fine amount. So we are also designating parking violations as to be enforced through the issuance of a city code citation, and we're setting the fine amount also, as Joe explained how we got to the fine amount.
So what is, I'm sorry.
No, do we have a separate fee for repeat offenders, or is it just 25?
As I understand, it's $25.
I thought we were going to go higher if we had repeat offenders.
I don't know if the magistrate has that authority, Counsel.
Well, we can always go through the normal code enforcement process, which does go up to $500
Okay.
Thank you. I just learned something.
for repeat violations, $250 for first time.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions. What's the process if they don't pay?
We were just discussing that today. First, the fine doubles, and then we will record that fine just as any other code enforcement fine that we have. It's not a lien on the property. It's not a traffic citation, so it can't impact the issuance of a driver's license. It's just like any other code violation we have. If somebody doesn't pay, if it's homestead, if they don't pay, it just sits there
As a lien.
as a lien on the property.
Okay. And what's our track record been so far?
We haven't started yet because we have to adopt this.
I mean,
We've got $500,000 out there in fines or
But not
debt to
parking.
the city, but it's not parking. We could do a better job of collecting.
Joe?
At the end of the day, it's really not necessarily about the revenue, it's about trying to adjust the behavior.
right. And are you finished? I've heard that already. I just hadn't.
Well, if we've got 500,000 out there, we're it's not about it's
But are we giving warnings first?
If you get a ticket for parking, you've been warned a lot, and that's the marching orders to our folks.
Okay.
We're not trying to be a police state, but we have some that want to play a game with parking, and it's not fair to the neighbors.
No, I guess my point was that they have an opportunity to conform and park correctly before we have.
I'd be surprised if the magistrate follows a fine if they come in and plead, say, I'm sorry, I've got 5 warnings, I've learned my lesson. But it's up to the magistrate, of course.
I don't think we should be given 5 warnings.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's not uncommon. I'm not saying we will in this instance, but we have some out there like that, Councilman.
Can I just ask, we keep talking about the repeat offenders, and Joe, how many would you say we actually have, just as an estimate?
That's a great question. Jane, do you or John feel comfortable in answering that question?
Are you talking about repeat offenders on parking violations or all
Yes,
violations?
on the parking
Parking.
violations, which is, why we're addressing them.
John Diller, Community Development Director. What started this process is we've got some people that will park right in the middle of their front yard, right in the middle of the grass. And so they'll move it, they'll play games with us as far as where they park it and stuff. We'll ask them to move it, they'll remove it, it'll be back the next day. So this was one of the means that we thought that we could have some incentive to where we could issue a ticket to them and maybe they would at least listen and quit. But we did get marching orders from the city manager to be real heavy on the warnings. We're not trying to punish these people. We're just trying to get their attention, I guess, is what we're trying to do with it. And it's not a large percentage, but it's a very consistent group that does it. There are repeat offenders that do it on a fairly regular basis.
What would you say, 20 properties citywide?
Maybe even if that many. Say probably between 10 to 15 properties.
Yeah, it's 4,000 homes.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that we're not creating parking regulations that didn't exist.
Right.
The way it used to be enforced under traditional code enforcement, by our process in state law, we have to give a notice, say you're in violation, and give them a reasonable time to comply, and all they'd have to do is move the car off. Then they comply. Then they move the car back. We start the notice process again. So you get into this circle, and there are certain code violations that are just cannot efficiently be handled through your traditional code enforcement because you have to give them notice, a reasonable opportunity to comply, and then they can comply and immediately violate. So we're switching. Now, under the existing code enforcement process, the fine can be up to $250, first-time violator, $500 for repeat. We said, let's do a citation system where it's like a ticket, but it's not a state law ticket, it's a city ticket. And we say, you got to pay a fine now. We don't have to give you the notice to comply. Just like when you're speeding, officers don't have to give you a warning. They can give you a ticket. Well, the same thing here. But Joe's instructed them to give warnings, but after we give warnings, we just give you a ticket. You're not given a notice and opportunity to correct it over and over again. We just give you a ticket. It's not $250, it's $25. If you don't pay, it goes to $50. If we have a problem piece of property like that, we may convert it to take them one time through the normal code enforcement process. We can still enforce it the old way, in which case we can do $250 up to $500 fines to get their attention, especially for someone who is just leaving their car there and not moving it at all. So
And then we can also get a repeat on a situation like that, and then each
And
time
that's
it
the
happens,
$500.
then we can do $250 if it was a real
I'm
problem.
not saying this applies to it, but we had a property owner that had an RV stored in the front yard. It can only be stored there for, 48
48
hours?
hours, yes, sir.
So they moved it, they had permission to move it to the neighbor's yard, front driveway. They leave it there for 24 hours, and then you can bring it back for another 48 hours. Then you park it over here for 24, 48 hours, and this goes back and forth and back and forth. It doesn't take a lot of collusion to get around the parking ordinances, is what I'm trying to say. And they know about all the ways to do it.
Any other discussion? I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Scott, if you would, Resolution 1706, please.
Resolution number 17-06 by title only for first and only reading. A resolution of the City of South Daytona, Florida, approving a traffic signal maintenance and compensation agreement with the Florida Department of Transportation and authorizing the city attorney to review and the city manager to execute said agreement, providing for repeal of resolutions in conflict herewith, providing for severability, and providing an effective date. And we just noticed something when we were reading the resolution. Debbie noticed it. The approval of this resolution authorizing the city manager to execute should also be implicitly including the mayor to execute. because the state prepared the document for the mayor's signature, not the city manager's.
What you've got in this resolution and the next two resolutions are items from the state that we did not generate, items that all the cities that I've been able to determine so far have executed. We had some questions, and they got delayed to where, we're down to where it's time to adopt them. I don't know that we've got a lot of discretion in it. I can tell you that this resolution you're approving now jumps from 5,000 to 15,000, or 17,000, excuse me, that's closer to what the costs probably are. Les is here. He's had a lot of conversation with the state, and I'd feel more comfortable with him addressing any of the concerns you may have. But I don't know that we got a lot of wiggle room on them when it boils down to it, And when you find things in there you don't really like, well, what are we going to do about it? And they don't seem to have any flexibility with these. They want everybody's standard, everybody with the same agreement. They don't want an exception in South Daytona from what Holly Hill has, for example. So that's pretty much where we are. It's almost like housekeeping.
I need a motion.
Move to approve Resolution 1706 with the modification as stated by the city attorney.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Scott, if you would, 1707.
Resolution number 1707 by title only for first and only reading. A resolution of the City of South Daytona, Florida, approving a highway maintenance memorandum of agreement with the Florida Department of Transportation for patterned pavement crosswalks on US 1 at the intersections of Reed Canal Road and Big Tree Road, and authorizing the city attorney to review and the city manager to execute said agreement, providing for repeal of resolutions in conflict herewith, providing for severability, providing an effective date. Same comment about this approval will also authorize the mayor to execute.
I need a motion and a second, please.
Move to approve.
Any other additional staff?
Now, everybody's familiar with those stamped crosswalks, which the newest one is going in at Reed Canal. State says, great, we don't mind you putting them in, we got them all over our systems, everywhere you got to maintain them. Look, we're doing it now, our last grant, all of the grants that put them in require us to maintain them, but now they want another resolution that says that we know we got to maintain them, even though we're under contract or an agreement for grants in the past to maintain them. Any questions?
Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Scott, if you would, resolution 1708.
Resolution number 17-08 by title only for first and only reading. A resolution of the City of South Daytona, Florida, approving a locally funded agreement, highway maintenance memorandum of agreement, and three-party escrow agreement with the Florida Department of Transportation for the painting of the mast arm traffic signals at the intersection of US 1 and Reed Canal Road, and authorizing the city attorney to review and the city manager to execute said agreement, providing for repeal of resolutions in conflict herewith, providing for severability, and providing an effective date. Same comment about authorizing the city manager will also authorize the mayor to execute.
I need a motion and a second, please.
Move to approve.
Second.
Real quick, the intersection at Reed Canal and US 1 is scheduled to have a new mask arms and traffic signal installed. Part of the scope of work was to put in a crosswalk there that would match the motif of the rest of our crosswalks at Reed Canal. The cost of that has been paid for with a TPO grant, and I'm thankful for that, which lowered the overall cost to the city for the project. The second leg of that project that involves the city would be the powder coating of the mask arm to bring it into compliance with the rest of the mask arms in the city on US 1, which are black. They're saying that, okay, fine, we're going to have that done, you have to pay for it though, which we said, yes, we're aware of that. But you're going to have to give us the money in advance. It goes in an escrow account. It's estimated to be $17,400. As I understand it, if it comes in less than that to have it powder coated, we get a refund of the difference. If it comes in more, we get a chance to reject it. That's what your resolution does in essence.
Any discussion?
Yeah, would we put that out to bid?
No.
They do
They
it,
do it.
and it may come in a little cheaper, but basically that's 17,000.
That's our estimate,
is-
their estimate.
That's what their estimate is. Man, that's expensive.
Just a question.
Man.
Les, what's the track history, track record on the powder coating itself? The others have been in there for a few years now. It's holding up pretty good.
That's correct. Les Gillis, Public Works Director. We originally started powder coating the mast arms when we did our streetscape projects. That's Bevel, that's Ferndale here, and that was Big Tree. When that coating came in, that coating is actually not as good as the coatings they have now. So the more updated coatings we have at Ridge and at Venture, and the more updated coatings at Ridge and Venture have a 5-year warranty. The ones on Bevel, Ferndale, and Big Tree only had 3 years, but they actually are holding up really well. You know, there's no color loss in any of those intersections, so I don't anticipate there being any problems. And this newer paint's supposed to be really good, so.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Scott, if you would, Resolution 1709.
Resolution number 17-09 by title only for first and only reading, a resolution of the City of South Daytona, Florida, approving a cooperation agreement with Volusia County for participation in the Community Development Block Grant Program and authorizing the city manager to execute said agreement, providing for repeal of resolutions in conflict herewith, providing for severability, and providing an effective date.
I need a motion and a second, please.
Move for approval. Second.
Any staff on this one?
Yes. HUD is requiring the county to get updated agreements from all the participants with the CDBG program. That's what you're doing. It's like all the other cities that's a participant with the county. And you have to have a certain, I think it's 50,000 population or better to qualify for your own self-administered community development program. Otherwise, you come under the umbrella of the county. They're needing an updated agreement.
And this is one you'll sign, right?
I think we both signed it.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Resolution 1710. Scott, if you would, by you agree.
A resolution of the City of South Daytona, Florida, authorizing the city manager or his designee to apply for a community planning technical assistance grant through the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity, providing for repeal of resolutions in conflict herewith, providing for severability, and providing an effective date.
I need a motion and a second, please.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any staff on this one?
Yes. All you're doing is the same thing we did last year, authorizing us to get 100% funding through a grant to update an element of our comp plan dealing with comprehensive zoning, particularly where we need it in our commercial areas, industrial areas. The grant we applied for last year, they lost, I understand, if you can believe it. They actually lost the grant and recommended we resubmit again this year. So we're bringing it back before you. And you that were here last year, I remember when we submitted it. I may remember when we submitted it.
Have we streamlined the ear at all? John? I'm sorry? The ear itself, I mean, is it, I know it was submitted last year, but the amendments and all that, is it as involved as it always was? Or?
John, to look We just went through the year process again. Every 7 years, the city has to do it. We just did that, and this gives us an opportunity to also address the elements that came up in the year with this, and I believe we're going to apply for a little more money this time than we did last year, and hopefully they won't lose it. But yes, we can address all that with the two.
Keep backup copies, John.
At least they're honest.
Yep. Any other comments? Have a motion, a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Last one, Scott, Resolution 1711.
Resolution number 17-11 by title only for first and only reading. A resolution of the City of South Daytona, Volusia County, Florida, urging members of the state legislature to adopt legislation amending current animal cruelty laws to impose stricter, harsher punishment and penalties for acts of animal cruelty.
Need a motion, a second, please?
Move to approve.
Second?
Any discussion?
Yes, I got a second from you, is that correct?
Yes.
I got one from Ralph, so.
Ralph did it all.
Okay, yeah, I was trying to.
Nancy can
I thought Nancy. Lisa did. The reason this is on your agenda is that, I think everybody probably figured it out, Ponce Inlet circulated the resolution and asked other cities and public entities in the county to approve a similar resolution, brought about primarily or totally because of a puppy that was brutally killed by the owner. You read the paper, you're familiar with it. And the way the statute reads now, it's a third-degree felony. They want to make it a second-degree felony. And I think the memo from the chief explains the difference. And I could find no reason not to put it on your agenda for consideration, really. Seems like a neighborly thing to do.
Absolutely. Any other comments? No, I agree. That's all I think it's, yeah. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries, Debbie. Item 10, unscheduled council members' comments. Mr. Schoen, we can start with you, if you don't mind.
Thank you. Glad to see the rain come. And that leads up to the next question. How's our little pond over there?
Wonderful. We had about an inch or so real quick the other day. For the first time, we didn't have to open the bays out and go out from the back parking lot here. The road functioned properly. We do need to get some of that water in those swales a little quicker. The swales have kind of grown up there where it hops over, but I was amazed. And everything's working. The pump's working. The fountain's working.
Nice picture on Facebook.
Oh, yeah, there you go. It's a functional stormwater facility that's cleaning up the Halifax and keeping our roadways open.
That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Lisa?
I'd like to wish everybody a happy 4th of July.
Wish us what?
A happy Father's Day. A happy Father's Day and 4th of July. We're going to meet after both.
Wonder who reminded her of that.
No comment.
No comment.
Vice Mayor?
Also, piggyback, happy 4th of July and Father's Day to my father-in-law. But also want to recognize that since we last met, the Volusia League of Cities gathered and had their annual awards banquet, and our city manager received the Blaine O'Neill Award for Excellence, which is basically the highest award that the League of Cities gives out. So I wouldn't call it a Lifetime Achievement Award, but I think in your case, after 30 years.
That's kind of what happens when they're ushering you out. That's what we do to hurry it along.
But real honor to recognize that, and you there, Lisa there, and everything, so very nice. So that's all I have, Mayor.
While you're on that, if I may, Mr. Mayor, last week at the Manager Association, they gave me the Manager of the Year award in the state of Florida.
Congratulations.
For a lot of the same reasons that I think that the League of Cities recognize.
Do you have a special spot on your home?
I've got to get it here. There's not any place to put it. I don't know what I'm going to do with this stuff, pack it up again, what everybody does. But it's been a good couple of weeks. It makes you certainly feel better. Thank you, Brent.
Home Depot has big boxes.
So it's going.
I have nothing. Meeting adjourned.
Do you have anything? George Cameron?
No, that's Jim Cameron.